how are we?
I'm really good, thanks. How are you doing?
Slightly overwhelmed by the pace of modern life, but we move.
Yeah, it's relentless.
Yeah.
So this is exactly why we started this.
Yes, I really alarmed some Americans at my gig last night.
What did you do?
I said the word gay and they started whispering to each other. And then I said the word non-binary and they walked out.
Oh my God.
Yeah, dark times. Not really repping it for the Americans, that couple last night.
No, it's terrifying that for them, modern life appears to just be too much.
I was obsessed. They were in, quote, Europe to see their favourite banjo player.
That's a red flag, straight up. the least cool of instruments, the banjo.
Yeah.
Which
and they were like, why not? We thought, why not? We'll go to Ireland for Paddy's Day. And I was like, oh, this is not going to go well for the Irish lesbian in the room.
Oh, God. Like when you meet like an anorak and hiking boot wearing American who's doing their like Europe trip.
The hiking boot in a modern metropolitan city is always a red flag for me.
Agreed. Like you can just wear trainers. Like they're like we have pavements.
Shall we to America, however?
Yeah, let's. So it's episode 4 of Queer Gals Watch the West Wing.
Let's dive in.
Yeah. So I'm really excited for this week's episode because it has a nice, like, meaty title, which is 5 Votes Down.
Thrilled. I should just say before we dive in, if you're just joining us now, please do go back and listen to the first 3 episodes where we discuss the pilot through episode 3 of The West Wing in order to try and help Fi understand American politics.
Yes, because I'm really coming from nothing. And actually, I felt like I did some really good homework this week because I was like, as I was watching, I was like, oh, I don't understand what that is. And also, I think I might have finally confirmed for myself the difference between a senator and a congressman.
Amazing.
Which feels like a really big step.
Huge day.
And so what are we going to be focusing on for our like sort of stupid questions section, Leigh?
This week we are, for our stupid questions section, going to be focusing on what even is the Second Amendment. Obviously, I know that can be a triggering topic for some people due to the violence of gun crime in the States. But I just want to warn people, I will let people know when we're going to go into that topic. And I do want to say we're not going to be focusing on any specific shootings or anything like that that's happened. We will just be talking about the history of the Second Amendment itself and why it is still such a vocal part of American politics.
Yeah. So shall we dive into episode 4, 5 Votes Down?
Please.
So this episode really kicks off with some high octane energy because we are at a sort of banquet and President Bartlet is giving a speech and behind him is a huge banner which just says the slogan, "Practical Idealism."
It's not super buzzy, is it? As like a presidential doctrine.
No, I would argue that it doesn't really mean anything.
Correct.
Because like idealism can't be practical, right?
I mean, idealism is like very 90s. So like I get that that's like the vibe of the time.
Would I be correct in saying that practical idealism as kind of like a concept feels very Clinton era America?
It feels Clinton adjacent, I would say.
Okay, excellent. Look at me talking about presidents like I know them. I loved the banquet though because it's very DAR from Gilmore Girls.
Oh my God, it is very Daughters of the American Revolution. Yes.
Yeah. One thing that we do see from this opening sequence is that Bartlet is quite the emphatic speaker, Leigh.
I loved seeing Bartlet in full glam. I loved seeing his showbiz persona.
The speech itself was quite intense. There was sort of a section of it that was like, grandmothers are dead, mothers are dead, kids are dead. Kids are dead. Which is quite...
It was erratic for me. It was slightly erratic.
I mean, I'm all for an impassioned speech, but it just feels like that's quite a heavy topic to be discussing over canapes.
Correct.
Yeah. Just like some elderly person just trying to eat their soup just while Bartlet shouts about children being dead. But we just let Jed Bartlet fade into the background as we go backstage for a little backstage moment with the core gang. And we find out from Leo that we are 5 votes down. We're not quite sure on what at this point.
Yes. But we imagine it's some kind of legislation that's on Bartlet's policy agenda.
Yeah, and it does feel really clear that this is the main plot point.
Yes.
For the episode.
We're going to be trying to get those 5 votes back.
Yeah. The kind of subplot that I'm enjoying at that moment is Toby watching Bartlet perform the speech like a director watching a show where the actors...
It's very you. It's very you.
It's Toby watching Bartlet like I watch actors when they're just flagrantly ignoring my notes. Just like him like miming along with Bartlet, but just also just so upset.
And dear listener, I have had the experience of being Fiona's Bartlet, being on stage doing a one-woman show and just seeing Fi full stage momming in the back row, just like absolutely living for each word. You're a very supportive director.
I would say that I yo-yo between Toby Ziegler and Amy Poehler in Mean Girls.
100%.
However, I am entirely distracted from Toby and Bartlet by CJ entering looking unbelievably hot.
The dress is phenomenal.
It's like a black and white silk backless halter dress. And Alison Janney just looks fucking incredible.
I had to rewatch the opening sequence of this episode maybe 3 or 4 times in order to take anything in of substance besides how incredible Alison Janney looks.
Yeah, and like, I had to put the subtitles on.
So did I. I just, you know what I appreciate is that like, because in order for a female actor, in a way, to be taken seriously, they almost have to be willing to like get dressed up and be like uglified a little bit.
Yeah.
And I feel like Alison Janney is obviously an actor who's like not afraid to go there. Like loved her in I, Tonya. Love her just when she's like, yeah, absolutely, put me in like a heinous wig but so I feel like that happens to her a lot because she's just like, absolutely, I'm going to live for my character.
Yeah.
But I just adored seeing Alison Janney be allowed to be as stunning as she is, whilst also being taken seriously as an actor. Incredible. Loved it.
Yeah.
No notes.
No notes. And what I loved even more was that she was made to look even more beautiful because the dress that Mandy was wearing was truly, truly disgusting.
90s prom.
It had both satin and sparkle, and you've just got to choose one or the other, Mandy.
Yeah. Also, like, if you're a political operative, I don't know that there's ever a space for sequins. That's an awful thing for me to say, but I just feel like it's not a sequin vibe.
No, it felt very like cocktail attire, and the sequins just, like, it just wasn't for me.
No, I agree.
Wasn't for me. However, seeing all the boys in their tuxes, loved that.
Did you get the bit from CJ where CJ turns to Josh and is like, well, your fan club was out in force, and he's like, they like me in my tux. Please.
We will come to Josh's fan club because I have very strong feelings on it. I just want to touch on Bartlet's speech just one more time. And this is just because it becomes apparent that he has done a reasonable amount of improvising.
He's gone off piece.
He's gone off script, which obviously Toby is deeply troubled by. In the words of Jed Bartlet, I did a little polish up there, right up on my feet, right in front of everyone. And I can say that this is my least favorite thing for performers to do. And Toby obviously is just very unimpressed, but can't really say to the President of the United States, like, I really hate when you do that. So Bartlet's just like, I half expected to see you coming at me with a salad fork.
Also, before we move on, we get the what I did not realize until my second watch through is a running storyline for CJ throughout this episode of a concern about the size of her neck.
Yeah, what's that about? And why are we talking about women's necks quite a lot through this episode?
We talk about women's necks so much. She turns to Josh and goes, her opening line of the episode, when she looks as incredible as she does, is, do I have an unusually large neck?
These are the sorts of things that Aaron Sorkin thinks women are worried about. I mean, I have never thought about the size of my neck.
Never.
Other parts of my body, sure.
I'd say most other parts of my body I've actively thought of the size of. Never the neck.
It's not the go-to body part.
She also implies that people have been talking about her neck.
But maybe it's just because she's so perfect. It's the only thing they can pick apart.
Yeah.
We very briefly see Charlie. There's just not enough of him in this episode, but I do enjoy that just generally we're getting the sense that he is constantly looking for the president and the president is never where he says he should be.
Yeah, I also really enjoyed, I don't want to get in trouble with the First Lady.
I feel like Charlie is kind of stuck between a rock and a hard place, between POTUS and FLOTUS.
Yep, absolutely.
We also get a little touch point here in the opening few minutes, which is that the president has, quote unquote, a bad back, and that he doesn't like taking his medicine because it makes him goofy. More on this later. Going back to the little fan club of Josh's, when they are leaving the kind of gala banquet thing, there's like a group of people outside and obviously reporters. You're like, okay, that makes sense. The president is there, probably some other high-ranking politicians. What you don't expect is for there to be like a gaggle of young women screaming at Josh as if he is the member of a boy band.
Yeah.
And in like chorus shouting, "We love you, Josh."
Yeah.
Do they not?
It's kind of crazy.
Do they not have jobs or homes to go to? Like, why are they here?
I think what we're being told here is that Josh is the sex symbol of the Bartlet administration.
That's a worrying fact. CJ has been robbed of that title.
Also, it's kind of a snub on Rob Lowe in a big way.
It really is, because you could argue that Rob Lowe is the most like kind of 90s conventional attraction, like kind of going toe to toe with sort of the George Clooney in ER vibe.
Yeah, nothing to take away from the savoir-faire of Josh. Like, as we've discussed, he's a hot man, but
sorry, I just need to bask in you saying, as we know, he's a hot man.
Spoken like a true gay woman. Speaking for the group.
On behalf of all lesbians. So the next kind of moment that we have that I wanted to dive into was we have this lovely little round table moment that's like, it's early hours of the morning. Everyone's got like a Chinese in very nostalgic, like little Chinese takeaway tubs. And by everyone, I mean like Mandy, CJ, Sam, and Toby are all sitting around kind of like enjoying their snacks and their dim sum. Meanwhile, Leo and Josh, highly stressed, trying to find out.
Working the phones
in the early hours of the morning, trying to find out who were the 5 congressmen or congress people who
no, they are all men, so.
Okay, yeah. Congressmen who aren't supporting the bill. I want to say, is it a bill?
Yeah, it's a bill.
Which they just refer to as 80211. Kind of prefer it to have like a fun name, but we'll go with that. And so the executive branch have been provided the bill by the Senate, and now they are pitching it to Congress.
So this is a bill that Bartlet is championing, and I believe the executive branch has had a hand in actually writing this bill. However, in order for it to become law, Congress has to vote on it.
Okay.
And it has to pass.
Because Congress is part of the legislative branch.
Correct.
Great. She's learning. We also touch in this kind of late night / early morning scene on what's going to be our B plot for this episode is going to be like a financial disclosures of the president's staff.
Yeah, so generally everyone in these kind of positions releases their tax returns to the public. I can't think of anything more harrowing. I
mean, it's really depressing, but also it's great.
Yeah, except for Trump. Trump obviously did not. Famously. Moving on.
moving on. Leo finally goes home. We get to go to Leo's house, which we haven't seen since the pilot. And confirmation that Sam Seaborn was right to hit on Leo's wife because Jenny is hot.
She's in like a silk negligee and robe.
There is something that was like, a lie was sold to me in 90s TV and film, which was that grown-up women have like matching pajama sets and like always sleep in like silky negligees and have little like robes. A truism as an adult now is that you continue to sleep in t-shirts you got when you were 16 years old.
Correct.
So I do feel lied to about that.
Absolutely.
Unfortunately, this isn't the kind of like, great day at work, honey, let's go to bed. Jenny's pissed.
Yeah.
Leo's forgotten it was their wedding anniversary. She's bought him a very thoughtful gift. It was mentioned in an earlier scene that his watch has been playing up. She's brought him a new watch. And there's some sad music. And I feel like he needs to make up for this situation.
Correct.
Cardinal sin in TV world forgetting the anniversary. I mean, he does work. He does work for the president.
I mean, I love for her to have like her own character arc and like her own story in terms of maybe what her career is, what her life is. Yes. However, I do feel your husband is only going to be the president's chief of staff for a limited amount of time, like 4 years max. Most people last 2 years and then burn out. I kind of feel like, not to be like a boomer mom about the situation, but like, did she not know what she was signing up for?
100%.
It's going to be a limited amount of time. Give the man some grace.
I know. And like, yes, he has staff that can do things for him, but the reason why he got the job is because he's best at it. Anyway, enough about their marriage. There's more to come in this episode. I think we should to the financial disclosures because this is comedy gold. So we find out that Toby Ziegler has accidentally got involved in insider trading. Like 100% by accident. And we find this out in a little two-hander scene with him and a White House lawyer called Leela, who is played by an actor, and I can't think what she's from, but I've seen her in lots of stuff. But I enjoy Leela thoroughly.
She's giving some strong queer energy.
Definitely. And therefore I would like to see more of her. So it's very Toby to accidentally turn $5,000 into $125,000. The conclusion of that is just that he's highly anxious. Like no moment of celebration, just him being like, oh God, oh God. So one might say that Toby is slightly in the shit because the financial disclosure, which was going to be like, Toby Ziegler, great guy, doesn't have any savings, is now Toby Ziegler, insider trader. We then cut to Josh walking through corridors and just Mrs. Landingham just saying congratulations to him.
With no context. So ominous, just on a bros walk and talk between Josh and Sam, just a bros walk and talk, being interrupted by Mrs. Landingham saying, congratulations, Josh, with no context. Terrifying.
There's then a smattering of other people doing the same thing. And Josh concludes classically, I sense I'm being mocked. It turns out that a woman called Sarah Wissinger bought Josh a highly expensive smoking jacket and cigarette holder.
Yes. And so people are congratulating him because he won the best gift over $25 of all the financial disclosures.
But like, I want to see the scene in which this woman makes Josh wear a smoking jacket and smoke a cigarette out of a cigarette holder, because I love the idea that Sarah Wissinger is like this much older woman. And that like Josh had a bit of a fuckboy era where he was just like dating this older woman and she was like, I love you in that smoking jacket, Josh. I'll get you one of your own.
Thrilled to be digging into Josh's fuckboy era. I couldn't be more overjoyed. And I also love that Donna is like kind of gently needling him in a kind of flirtatious way, being like, and she also got you this ridiculous cigarette holder. And he's like, she was very fond of me.
Who is Sarah Wissinger? I need to know. Speaking of EAs, Margaret, Leo's EA, is coming through with the salvaging of the anniversary.
Yeah.
So her and Leo have a great kind of like walk and talk scene where they're like sorting what seems to be like a kind of candlelit dinner at Leo's house.
What kind of champagne does she like? Would she like a violinist?
Yeah. Now, this is where we come back to discussions of women's necks, where Leo describes his wife as having a great neck.
My wife has a great neck, which is why he uses it as a justification for buying her a pearl choker.
But like, I just don't know if I would ever want to be described by my partner as having a great neck.
I can see Dan saying it. Fi has a great neck.
Anyway, I feel like Margaret is on the case. She's laying some foundations to get Leo back on track with Jenny.
Yeah.
Margaret knows all of the skeletons in their marriage's closet, I think.
100%. I think Margaret is like a career EA who's been with Leo for like the past 25 years.
Yeah. And when he got the job with Bartlet, he was like, one caveat, I'm bringing Margaret.
You're coming with me, Margaret. Mm-hmm. You're coming with me to the White House.
We go back to the votes and these lost 5 votes. And Josh basically speaks to Leo and kind of asks if it's appropriate for him to threaten a congressman.
Basically, yes.
And I just think it's a risky little game.
It's a very risky little game.
Because Josh can be such an ass. I just feel like it's very easy for things to backfire.
Josh is riding high on the adoration of his fan club and he is feeling frisky.
And actually, to be fair, the scene that he has with this congressman is pretty iconic.
Because he goes full Men in Black on this congressman.
He's like there, he's got his shades on. It's an exterior shot in DC. They're next to like a fountain. He's got his like pager on his belt. And he tears this congressman to shreds.
To shreds. To absolute shreds.
He says, vote yes, or you won't even be on the ballot 2 years from now. He then talks about the fact that Bartlet would go to this congressman's, what's the American version of constituency?
Wisconsin. It's a district in Wisconsin.
A district. Okay. So Bartlet would go to this district and he'd be like, just balls to the wall, threatening this man's job.
Literally like, we're going to provide a challenger for your position.
Yeah. We also kind of get a bit more detail about the bill and that it is about gun control and certain types of guns being made illegal.
Yes.
Yeah. The other thing that Josh mentions is that he says the president doesn't hold a grudge, but I would argue that Bartlet is in fact very good at holding grudges.
Yes, but also just to provide you with the full quote, the president doesn't hold grudges. Sweep sunglasses back onto face. That's what he pays me for.
He just loves the drama, doesn't he?
Loves it.
So I feel like when Josh was at Yale, no, Harvard.
Yes.
Yale,
I think.
Yale. I imagine he like did some amateur dramatics.
Yes.
I was just like,
yes.
Maybe in like a production of like, I don't know, like a Shakespeare or maybe like Don't Look Back in Anger or something.
I think that Josh once gave a passable Lysander in Midsummer Night's Dream.
That's a sensational read. I want to go back to Toby's financial disclosure because he just continues.
He's just continuing to have a breakdown about it.
An absolute meltdown. Classically, Sam Seaborn is just making this entirely about himself and was like, well, I'm being really supportive of you and you know, it would have been nice if you'd been supportive of me and my friend. And we're like, don't make this about Laurie.
But that does encourage me that we're coming back to Laurie soon because we're just gently kind of weaving her back in.
Yeah. I'm also obsessed with the fact that as Sam's like, no one's really talking about it. Toby, like, it's not a big deal. That CJ then crashes that, takes the piss out of Toby.
By saying, I'm a bit short on lunch money. Would you happen to have $125,000? But it interrupts herself by laughing at her own joke.
And then walks away down the corridor laughing the entire way. which is just sensational. Luckily, we get another press conference from CJ as well.
She runs that press briefing like a type 5. It's like she is the ringmaster and they are eating out of her hand.
It's unbelievable. It's like everything is peppered with really solid punchlines. And then when she was closing it, she literally signs off like a comic. She's like, that's all for now, folks.
Miss Maisel, eat your heart out.
100%. We are going to move on to Congressman Wick.
The worst kind of man.
I hate him. The first red flag is that as he shakes Josh's hand for the start of their meeting, he doesn't say like, nice to meet you, thanks for your time. He just says, dude.
So fucking grim.
You're a congressman. Have some respect.
Also, he's brought his entire staff with him. Small dick energy.
Yeah, you took the words out of my mouth, Leigh. I just can't express, as you can tell, my rage for this type of man.
Just an aging frat boy with a Napoleon complex.
Who just can't get over the fact that maybe they're just not quite as relevant as they were when they were 21.
Yeah.
Very much like was on the football team, didn't get the scholarship for football at uni, but parents paid for him to go to the college he wanted to anyway. Was like a big name on campus.
Yeah.
But didn't really do that well. Kind of like my daddy got me this job energy.
Yeah. Yeah.
Which I don't like. And I feel like that's the sort of person that Josh hates.
Yeah, but I feel like they were in the same frat.
Oh.
I feel because when Josh walks in, Josh goes, me and Wick want to talk about old times, guys.
Oh.
And like sends that's why in the beginning he's like, there's no way that we've lost Chris Wick. Because he thinks Chris Wick loves to lick my asshole. So there's no way that we've lost him.
Okay, stunning. So actually that gives much more context to Josh's line, shove it, dude, we're not in a frat house anymore.
Yeah.
Okay, I love that. Josh just absolutely slaying throughout this episode. I wonder, he's very, very passionate about gun control. And I wonder if, not that people have to have personal experience in order to be passionate about a subject, but there does feel like this is like one of the reasons he got into politics.
Yeah, I think this is a particularly strong issue. Also, I think it's important to note that we are just around the time of Columbine when this episode is coming out. So it was, as it is today, I mean, it was a huge thing on people's minds.
So it does feel personal. And I think it's kind of genius from Sorkin to, as Josh is kind of schooling Congressman Wick about this, that Wick basically says, yeah, but it's not even about the guns. It's about the fact that, like, I've had really limited time with the president and, like, I've only been in one picture with him since I've been a congressman, and it was actually a group photo.
So pathetic.
It's so petty. And actually, I think it's an incredibly insightful political point to make.
Yeah.
That, like, whilst a bill is being passed that has, like, human life at its heart, someone's being like, yeah, but I don't want to support it unless I get, like, a photo op with the president.
He literally says, where's the courtship?
So I am with Josh when Josh says, I'm so sick of Congress, I could vomit.
Yeah, grim, bleak.
It is bleak. So we're kind of, Josh and Leo are working through this episode, going to each of the congressmen who have pulled out of supporting the bill. So they're really busy throughout this episode. However, Toby is not. He just seems to be in chairs in different rooms with his head in his hands.
Yeah.
He in fact says the line, there is literally no one in the world that I don't hate right now.
Correct.
I love Toby Ziegler. So it just feels like Toby is highly anxious and stressed. Mandy doesn't seem to be hugely involved in the votes side of things, but she's very much kind of in discussions with CJ surrounding the financial disclosure and how they're kind of spinning that.
Yeah, Mandy does seem a bit like watered down in this episode from
Thank
the
God.
car crashing, wild driving of yore in episodes 1 and 3. But I do wonder if this is the start of the end for Mandy, because I did read in Aaron Sorkin's introduction to the script book that basically he came to the conclusion within the first season that the character of Mandy wasn't really working out in the way that it was supposed to. So she doesn't really feature long term in the series. And I kind of feel like you can see they're kind of struggling with what to do with her in this episode.
It makes sense. And I think it's because they've set up such a strong core team that actually there's no point of weakness where Mandy can come in and save the day.
No, I think Mandy was much better as an antagonist when she was outside of the remit, and actually her coming into the office doesn't really make sense.
Poor Mandy.
Yeah.
But also she's annoying, and I think that there are more interesting characters. Like, I would like more time with Donna over Mandy.
I would love more time with Donna. I would love more time with Margaret. I would love more time with Mrs. Landingham.
Dolores, please. Our good close friend Dolores. Leo goes to meet a congressman. It is an incredible scene. Another sort of like exterior walk and talk through DC. But he came to play because Leo gives him the like speech about the reasons why he should vote. And this congressman, who is a black man, is just like,
Yeah, so he was never going to vote yes for this bill because he doesn't think that it goes far enough, and he thinks it's kind of pointless, and he's pushing for more. So what Leo is doing, he's trying to avoid having to go to Tillinghast, who really he needs the vice president to step in order to get to Tillinghast. So he's trying to find someone who was always no to replace that vote. Yeah, it's stunning. When Leo is kind of there being like, it's black men that are being wheeled into hospitals with gun wounds, he just turns around to Leo and says, I'm encouraged to hear that the White House has discovered there's a problem in this country.
Yeah. And I think it's a beautiful way to oppose Congressman Wick, because you've got this kind of very 2D frat boy congressman, and then you've got this like real career politician who's like...
And we do learn later in the episode that he's actually the leader of the Black Caucus in Congress.
Okay, cool. Yeah. And I love that we get to hear his opinion, which is, as you say, it's not about publicity. It's genuinely about policy. He doesn't believe the bill is strong enough or well researched enough. And he's like, I'm not interested in wasting taxpayer dollars.
Yeah.
I think it's such a striking way to show the breadth of Congress, and that, yes, we have a lot of these kind of daddy got me the job congressmen, but we also have people who are like, no, the Bartlet administration isn't going far enough.
Yes. And I really enjoyed, because Leo does shamelessly white-splain to this man.
Really,
and I really love that.
It's quite awkward.
It's really awkward, and I really like that. And, you know, Leo obviously is having marital issues, so he's off his game, but that's not an excuse for explaining the issues facing black people in America to the leader of the Black Caucus.
No.
And I love that he turns around to Leo and says, please don't tell me how to be a leader of black men.
Yeah. He says, please don't tell me how to be the leader of black men. You look like an idiot.
Obsessed.
It's just a sensational scene, so well written.
Yeah, and I think this is really important to come back to, because there is, I think the relationship between the Second Amendment and race is really interesting. So we're going to come back to that.
Okay, great. Speaking of Leo's personal life, we go and we see his sort of damage control dinner. Did he pull it off? No, he did not. We don't see them sitting down to a candlelit meal with a violinist. In fact, Jenny says, I can't do this anymore. So she leaves him. Like, she literally...
And she goes to the Watergate Hotel, which is quite fun, just as a side note.
I thought that was quite funny too. I was like, so many hotels in DC. What a choice. This scene was emotionally devastating, and I wasn't quite ready. I didn't expect the first time for me to be emotionally moved in this show to be because of the actor playing Leo.
He really, really broke me. When his wife turns around and says that she's leaving him, and then his response is, call me when you're going to sleep.
Honestly, it's literally given me goosebumps right now. It's so real.
I know it's the bare minimum, but we love a man who just fucking loves his wife.
Yeah, and who doesn't want to be alone. And I think we can circle back to your point of like, when your husband is like, I've been asked to take on the role of chief of staff, you kind of know what you're signing up for. And he says, we had conversations about this. And for her then to turn around and be like, yeah, it's just not working for me. It feels a little weak from Jenny.
Yeah. I'd love her to have a bit more of a story to back up that choice.
And a little bit more character. She does seem very like, oh, it would be helpful for Leo to have a personal crisis. Let's have his wife leave him.
Yeah.
But it does feel like, frankly, rude.
Yeah.
And imagine going from that conversation, your wife being like, I can't do this anymore, to having to go and see Hoynes, the vice president. And for a second, for like a tiny millisecond, I actually thought Hoynes was going to be nice to Leo, because he was like, hey, like, what's up? Like, sit down, gets him a glass of water. Is like, what's going on?
And I did think the minute that he offered him water, I was like, interesting. I feel like this is a whiskey moment, but no. And this is when we discover that they are both in recovery.
Yeah. It's a very interesting character development point for both of them. And yeah, so when Hoynes is like, when was the last time you went to a meeting? I was like, whoa, that's really personal. But then Hoynes was like, oh no, I run a meeting. And it's like a secret AA meeting in the White House just for
super high-powered men with alcoholism.
Because that, you're like, oh my God, that makes so much sense, because you wouldn't be able to, obviously Alcoholics Anonymous, the clue is in the name, but you wouldn't, as a high-profile political individual, be able to go to an AA meeting.
No.
And so, yeah, I was like, this feels very important. However, don't trust Hoynes.
No.
At some point, he's going to hold this over Leo.
Yeah.
This is like his playing card.
It is, 100%. And I am also tantalized at the hint of Leo's backstory.
I'm like, it adds so much color to the concept of his wife leaving him. I'm like, is the fact that he's in recovery something that Jenny knows? You know, is it something like, was his relationship with alcohol something that he kept from her? Because if your partner is in recovery and you're like, I think I need to end this relationship, there was no sentence that was, obviously it's a drama. So, but like, you would be like, do you want to call your sponsor? Do you want to, are you going to be okay?
Yeah, I kind of feel like that was poor from her.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, she might have a nice neck, but she's very rude. Okay, I could talk about Leo for literally hours, but we should move on. What we get from that conversation with Hoynes is that Hoynes is going to go and talk to this congressman who is Tillinghast, who is apparently just like a massive prick. So
yeah, and I think the key in here is that they're both Texans, so that's why Hoynes has the power to speak to him on his level, speak his language,
Texan to Texan. So we go to the Oval Office. We're planning to have a meeting with the president about financial disclosures and kind of what are we going to do about the fact that Toby Ziegler is an insider trader. Mandy throws out, she is just not letting the Sarah like smoking jacket cigarette holder thing go, refers to her as Sarah Wisson slut.
Yeah, which like, hun, you're better than this. You're so much better than this. Also, this is your ex-boyfriend. Like, this is just embarrassing. There was also a scene earlier where she was like, you got a year's supply of fruit. She's just completely obsessed with all of the gifts that Josh has been given.
She has a job at the White House. She needs to stop obsessing over her ex-boyfriend.
What I would enjoy is if she like went to Donna and was like, one woman to woman, Sarah Wizen slut. Don't say it in Josh's ear.
Also, like, don't say it like in a room full of your co-workers in the Oval Office.
No. If you need to take a fellow gal pal aside and be like, Sarah Wizen slut, am I right? That's a different story. Don't say it in a room where you need to be taken seriously.
Exactly. We have a devastating moment where all of the kind of team ask Leo how the anniversary meal went.
And he lies.
Because they're like his kids, and it's so devastating. Crashing into this with the roguest energy I've ever seen from an actor is Bartlet. He's back in his leisure wear Lee, and he is high as a kite. Also,
like, him in a Notre Dame Fighting Irish sweatshirt is just like so perfect.
It's the jeans for me. It's the ironed jeans. It's giving Michael Scott in The Office. It's just the almost boot cut. Almost. Just a whisker off a boot cut. Ironed blue jeans with his like university jumper. Stunning. Turns out the president has misjudged his pain medication for his back and is therefore incredibly high on opioids.
I would just like to note for the listener that in our episode notes, Fi has said that he has taken Vicodin, in parentheses, an opioid, and Percocet, in parentheses, also an opioid.
It's like such intense pain medication. What is wrong with his back? They were like, the president's got a bad back. But if he's being prescribed Vicodin and Percocet, like, that's intense.
So intense.
But he kind of is coming across like a drunk auntie at a wedding.
Yeah. Also, I love that the 90s were such a simpler time when we thought like opioids are funny.
Yeah.
Little did we know. Little did we know.
When I was looking up, because I was like trying to, because obviously Vicodin and Percocet are American pharmaceutical names, so I just wanted to confirm what they were. Literally, as soon as I typed them in, everything that came up was a news story about the opioid epidemic in America. Bleak, really bleak.
So bleak.
But anyway, back to Bartlet being funny and high. He just like cuddles Toby for a while. And no one really knows how to deal with him. But he's just like really pleased to be there, but they're all really busy, and Mrs. Landingham and Charlie just have to like come to the rescue.
Charlie, who is all of 19, comes in and is like, Mr. President, I left you alone for 2 minutes.
And I would love to have seen the scene, which is just Charlie like walking around the president's private residence or the White House, just like, where is he?
He's gone wandering off again.
Just can't. Yeah, first he loses his glasses, now he loses himself. So Sam comes up with a conclusion for Toby's $125,000, which is that Toby agrees to not be paid for a year and instead cash out his shares and use that as his paycheck.
Yeah.
This is a really shit deal.
Yeah.
Like, I'm gutted for Toby.
As Toby says, I feel like I just got screwed with my pants on.
So sensational.
And I love that Sam makes this suggestion for his boss.
I know. And part of me is like, is this still all about Laurie?
It is. It's retribution for Laurie, 100%.
Sam is so dramatic.
Such a petty, petty boy.
Such a petty boy. My standout moment of that entire scene is Charlie like manhandling the president out of the room to take him back to bed, and the president just going, before I go, please let me say just this. I'm seriously thinking about getting a dog.
I laughed out loud.
Me too.
Maybe an Irish setter.
Of course it has to be Irish, because did you know, Leigh, that Bartlet is Irish? Not that it's ever been mentioned like 7 times in every episode so far.
I do feel like mildly offended that Notre Dame's mascot, which is famously usually like some kind of fun animal, is the Fighting Irish.
Yeah.
It doesn't feel great for me.
It's not great representation, is it?
No.
I'm so sorry. Let's just go to the scene that really stood out for me, which is just 2 hateful men in a room together.
Yeah.
Which is Hoynes and, is it Tillinghouse?
Tillinghouse, yeah.
Tillinghouse.
I think.
I really hate that congressman. He is like the type of American man that I can't abide. I know I've already said this about Wick, but this is just to a next level, where he's like, as long as they have a gun, I want my wife to have a gun. I want my daughter to have a gun. And damn it, I want one too.
Yeah, it's kind of crazy. It is really good representation, I think, of the congressmen that are just like older than dust, who haven't had a primary challenger in decades.
Yeah.
And they've just been like fannying around Congress for longer than anyone can remember.
Yeah. And it's just like, they're just drinking their little coffee out of their little China coffee cups and saying, you can't put the toothpaste back in the tube. And as someone that has lived their entire life in a country where there is pretty strong gun control.
Yeah.
I find the theory of the best way to combat gun crime is to have a gun yourself. I just can't get my head around that as a concept at all.
Yeah, there was a point where I was in high school where they were talking about giving teachers guns. And I just remember my absolutely impeccable history teacher, Mr. McQueen, being like turning around to us and being like, I don't want to have a gun. Do you guys want me to have a gun? And all of us were like, no. It would be terrifying thinking that there was just like a gun in his desk.
Yeah. And one of the things that stood out to me when I did some traveling in America is any sort of public building that you go into or university, on all of the entrance doors, there are like no smoking signs, but with guns. And it's just crazy. I mean, we'll get onto this in your kind of teaching section, but it's a really fascinating scene between the 2 Texans. And Hoynes basically shows his hand and he's like, well, I'm going to be the president of the United States one day and you're not. So he pushes...
That's the reason why you should
vote.
Say yes.
Stay with me, your fellow Texan, and I'll look after you when I'm president.
Yeah.
So interesting to see Hoynes' game plan laid out.
Yeah.
I'm looking forward to that playing through.
Yeah.
So the bill passes, but Hoynes gets the credit for it rather than Leo and his team who have put loads of work into it. And that Hoynes classically doesn't talk about, Bartlet, and Bartlet doesn't talk about Hoynes. So it's sort of this there's a very weird energy between the two of them.
Yeah, and also it's noted that the leader of the Black Caucus had no comment, and it's noted that him and Bartlet are close, and so that's viewed as being a snub.
We're building up to some definite shaky ground in Bartlet's administration, I think.
Definitely.
We close the episode with, because Josh just can't let something go, and because he hasn't got any personal credit for this bill, he goes to Hoynes to just be a little bitch. Which again is a risky little game from Josh. That's the vice president.
Yeah.
He's playing with fire, and Hoynes just does not rise to it at all.
And I mean, Hoynes is right in that he very well may be the next American president from the Democratic Party. He should really be nicey.
Yeah. And it's very Hoynes that his sign off to Josh is just clap him on the shoulder and go, welcome to the NFL.
What does that even mean?
It's just men, Leigh. It's just men being men. Just boys being boys. Football, politics, women with good necks. What more could you want? We close out the episode with a moment where Leo walks into the secret AA meeting, which does feel like a really poignant final image.
Yeah.
But also, I'm so scared of Leo getting in trouble.
Yeah, I think being outed as an alcoholic while White House chief of staff in the 90s would not be fun.
No, that's a career ender, I think, at that time period.
Yeah.
I just don't trust Hoynes as far as I could throw him. And I couldn't throw him very far. I'm not very strong.
He's a slippery little eel.
He's a slippery little snake. And I just don't like him. I imagine he would do so well in a presidential campaign.
Yeah.
Charismatic, a little bit sexy. He'd get the mum vote.
Yeah.
So we'll get to our predictions for next week's episode. But personally, I feel like that was a jam-packed 45 minutes.
Absolutely couldn't agree more.
Should we just completely lower the tone by talking about who looked the best?
I mean, it has to go to CJ's backless dress.
Yes, best fashion of the
episode. There's no debate for me.
I mean, I think an honourable mention to Josh's sunglasses and the work that they were doing.
He was also doing a lot of swishing of his blazer in that scene around the belt clip, Yeah. There was a lot happening.
What do you believe a British or Irish politician could never get away with, Leigh?
I'm going to say I cannot imagine a British or Irish politician standing on stage and going to end a speech saying, God bless you all and God bless the UK.
Yeah, no.
It just wouldn't, no.
No, it's not something that we could pull off. Also, you'd just get absolutely slated for mentioning God.
Yeah.
My argument here was that I think that any sort of smoking jacket would just be an immediate career ender in the UK. Disclosure that you had been gifted a smoking jacket. That's just an immediate ick with a British person. But Josh, somehow you're yeah, fair play, lad. Kind of love that for you.
You also made the excellent point that a British Prime Minister could never get away with wearing a uni-branded hoodie.
Yeah, it's just embarrassing. You'd be
it'd be so embarrassing.
It's just we get it. You went to Oxford. That's not something you should be bragging about.
Maybe let's not draw attention to the fact that every UK politician basically went to one school and 2 universities.
Yeah.
It's so bleak.
It makes me want to throw up. God, I'm so sick of British government, I could vomit. So we were 16 minutes into the episode when we were talking about the NRA. And I do think that the kind of main focus of this episode was obviously gun control and therefore the Second Amendment. And it was very interesting because I feel like we got quite a strong rundown of how Bartlet's government views gun control. Yeah,
that basically they need to make change inch by inch.
Yeah, it's not something that they can be drastic with. It's model by model.
Yeah.
What was your man, I feel like a man moment?
There's so many in this episode. I loved "Shove it, dude, we're not in the frat house anymore." Obsessed. Also, immediately prior to that, Josh said, "Wick, I own his ass."
Speaking of like owning someone's ass, I feel like it's a very, that's very,
it's very male.
Very male. I just think welcome to the NFL, just because it's so nonsensical.
I guess it's kind of like a welcome to the big leagues kind of thing.
Yeah, but also government isn't like football.
Thank you so much. I think it's really important that that is said more.
What moment made you proudest to be an American, Leigh?
I really loved from Richard's, "Please don't tell me how to be a leader of black men. You look like an idiot." That was strong.
Yeah, it was a really beautiful, like a really beautifully handled scene, I think. I want to undercut that by just saying that the moment that I enjoyed most and made me proudest to be an honorary American was just the president being high.
Correct. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
So Leigh, take me through. So the Second Amendment is part of the Constitution.
Correct. It is an amendment to or a change to the Constitution.
Oh, okay.
So the Second Amendment reads, "A well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state, the right of people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed." There are only 3 countries in the world that protect the right to bear arms. They are the USA, Mexico, and Guatemala. However, in Mexico and Guatemala, the right to bear arms only extends to your home. And they both make it quite difficult to buy guns. Whereas in the USA, guns are less regulated than driving.
Whoa, that's a mad statistic.
And more children and adolescents are killed by guns than cars.
Yeah, that's another mad statistic, isn't it?
And it's the only country on earth where there are more guns than people.
Not to sound like a broken record, but that's another mad statistic.
So the courts previously had interpreted this as the individual states had the right to raise their own military of armed citizens. But in 2008, the John Roberts Supreme Court had a different interpretation in the District of Columbia v. Heller, where they said that the Second Amendment conferred an individual right to bear arms.
Okay, so that's the interpretation that I find interesting and confusing, because obviously if you think of the Second Amendment and when it was written, you know, you're in the aftermath of the War of Independence and the Civil War, right?
The Civil War came later.
Okay, but you've just got your freedom from Britain, so it makes sense to be like, well, there could be more trouble ahead. Like, let's be able to have an army, basically.
Yes. So retired Justice John Paul Stevens said the amendment was adopted out of a fear that a national army would infringe on the rights of the individual states. But that is a relic of the 18th century. And he went on to say the year before he died that the Second Amendment should be repealed.
Wow.
However, there is another route of why the Second Amendment came into being, which a writer and thinker called Elie Mystal wrote about in his book, Allow Me to Retort, A Black Guy's Guide to the Constitution, where we learn that, like lots of things, unfortunately, the Second Amendment is rooted in white supremacy. So Elie Mystal writes in his book, there was an original purpose to the Second Amendment, but it wasn't to keep people safe. It was to preserve white supremacy and slavery. So when the Second Amendment was being debated, whether it should be added to the Constitution or not, the governor of Virginia at the time, who was the governor of Virginia at the founding of America as a country, George Mason, said that the southern states needed a disciplined militia in order to put down slave revolts without having to have the involvement or the okay of the northern states via the federal government.
So it's a hugely archaic and systemically racist amendment.
Correct.
It's one of those things, though, that's like, I think it caused so much controversy over the several hundreds of years it's been in existence that I don't think it will ever change.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's really important to look back at when maybe language was plainer and less cloaked, where the roots of these issues that are still affecting politics today actually came from.
Yeah.
And I think it's really important to acknowledge that a lot of them came from racism.
Yeah.
So in the 1930s, we obviously have loads of gangsters with submachine guns, including Pretty Boy Floyd, Bonnie and Clyde, Machine Gun Kelly, and Franklin D. Roosevelt is like really pressing Congress for a new deal for crime, which was known informally as the Anti-Machine Gun Bill.
No bill should have to be called that.
Correct. But it wasn't actually, it was quite innovative in that it wasn't actually a ban on machine guns. It was putting such a high tax on machine guns that basically no one would be able to afford to buy them.
Okay.
So you tax them out of existence, basically. And the Attorney General at the time, Homer Cummings, great name, said a machine gun, of course, ought never to be in the hands of any private individual. Nobody expected the underworld to be going around giving their fingerprints and getting permits to carry these weapons. But then, if they're caught with a gun that isn't registered, they can be charged with tax evasion, which is how Al Capone got brought down.
Oh, so it's actually reasonably clever.
Yeah, because the thing is, like, you can ban machine guns, right? But how are you going to get all the machine guns back that private individuals own? Now, the NRA, the National Rifle Association.
The only thing I really know about the NRA is that they put a huge amount of funding into American politics.
Correct. So at first they were modeled on the English National Rifle Association, and it was about like training in marksmanship and like all that kind of thing. And then in 1976, they established the Political Victory Fund to challenge gun control candidates and to support candidates who supported gun rights. So the NRA gave candidates ratings basically from A+ through F, A+ being for candidates who had most vigorously promoted to defend the Second Amendment, and an F being true enemies of gun owners' rights. And they endorsed a presidential candidate for the first time in 1980, backing Ronald Reagan. Chief Justice Warren Burger in 1991 said, "If I were writing the Bill of Rights now, there wouldn't be such a thing as the Second Amendment. It has been the subject of the greatest piece of fraud, I repeat the word fraud, on the American public by special interest group that I have ever seen in my lifetime."
Whoa.
Now, this is where we get into the kind of what the political climate was for around the time of the West Wing. In 1993, Bill Clinton signed the Brady Bill, which was named for the press secretary to President Ronald Reagan, who was shot and paralyzed in 1981 in an attempted assassination attempt on Reagan.
Whoa.
And the Brady Bill mandated background checks in order to prevent criminals and minors from purchasing guns. And then in 1994, he followed it up with the Violent Crime Control and Law Enforcement Act, which included a 10-year ban on the sale of assault weapons.
Well, that seems like really quite an impressive amount of legislation to pass.
The NRA responded by joining forces with Republicans to use gun control issues to motivate voters in the 1994 midterm elections, where Bill Clinton got absolutely walloped.
Oh, Bill.
Well,
I mean, we all Bill, just because I'm always sad when someone gets absolutely hooned in a by-election, but less so. Like, I'm not saying that he's a person who is blameless.
No. Newt Gingrich stated around this time that support for or against gun control defined one's partisan identity. So this is when it really becomes like Democrat versus Republican issue.
So in the 90s was that kind of period where it was like, if you're pro the Second Amendment, you're a Republican, and if you're not, then you're a Democrat.
I think it was the first time that it was really like
polarizing,
absolutely split down the middle. Yeah. Ted Cruz had an attack campaign on Obama in 2016 saying Obama wants your guns. And there was all of this language around like gun grabs, like Democrats were going to come and take away your guns.
I think I remember that in the press. Yeah.
In 2016, on the campaign trail, Trump said Hillary wants to essentially abolish the Second Amendment. And by the way, if she gets to pick her judges, nothing you can do, folks. Although the Second Amendment people, maybe there is. I don't know. Now, this was interpreted as a call to violence against Hillary Clinton by gun owners. Martin Luther King's daughter tweeted, "As the daughter of a leader who was assassinated, I find Trump's comments distasteful, disturbing, and dangerous."
Agreed.
The Trump campaign came back with the Trump campaign's statement on dishonest media. Quote, "It's called the power of unification. Second Amendment people have an amazing spirit and are tremendously unified, which gives them great political power. And this year they will be voting in record numbers, and it won't be for Hillary Clinton, it will be for Donald Trump." So they're basically trying to say that his comments were a call to political action rather than violence.
I don't like describing someone as a Second Amendment people, as if that's their only kind of like defining factor as an individual.
Yeah, so Trump is really the one who turned being a gun owner into like a political identity and a lifestyle and almost like a culture in and of itself, which is why the downfall of the NRA actually becomes less relevant because it's become such a politically polarized issue. Because this is where it starts to all go wrong for the National Rifle Association, because in 2019, it was revealed that the NRA because the NRA is a charitable organization, it's a not-for-profit. So they take donations and they take dues from their members. And $20,000 of donations were spent on outfits for the CEO, Wayne LaPierre, including he spent $39,000 in one day at a Beverly Hills luxury boutique.
Oh my God. I mean, it really like puts Josh's smoking jacket into perspective.
It really does. Dues and donations also paid for $240,000 worth of expensed trips to Lake Como in Italy and the Bahamas, including $200,000 for a private jet and $18,000 for a chauffeur. Dues and donations also paid for his wife's hair and makeup team to travel with her and stay in luxury hotels. The issue obviously being that as a not-for-profit, this is illegal.
Yeah. Also, all of this has been financially disclosed. So it's not even like this is secret information that's been leaked. Like they have provided their tax return and this is what's been put in. And yet individuals who have their own brains.
So Wayne LaPierre is not a public official. He's like CEO.
He's a charity runner. Oh my God. It makes me so stressed. Human beings have the capacity to make their own decisions based on information that they receive. And it just baffles me when people have the information in front of them and they're like, yeah, but I'm just going to not let that affect how I feel about it. I would be so mad if I was like, okay, every year I'm going to give my however many dollars to pay my like membership of the NRA, knowing that that is helping protect the Second Amendment and my right to have semi-automatic weapons in my home where my children are, whatever. Then to be able to see that actually that money has gone towards the wife of the person running this charitable organization to have her hair and makeup team.
Her glam squad.
Her glam squad, if you will. Just boils my piss.
Yeah. And you know whose else's piss it boils?
Please tell me.
Letitia James, the Attorney General of New York.
Stunning. Yes. Tell me about Letitia.
Letitia James, just like in your own time, Google her. I'm obsessed. I love her so much. She subpoenaed all of the board members of the NRA and basically took a lawsuit out against the NRA for misuse of funds. She also did the same with Trump's charity, which ended up having to have its charitable status revoked.
Surprise, surprise.
Letitia James is doing big things. I love her. I'm obsessed with her. the woman can't be stopped, and she's just an incredible force for good. But so this did ultimately lead to the NRA attempting to declare bankruptcy as an organization, but it was deemed that their filing for bankruptcy was kind of politically motivated and was trying to undermine Letitia James's lawsuit. So it didn't end up working. Basically, the NRA is kind of farted out of existence. It's still there, but it's not nearly as potent politically as it used to be. But unfortunately, the damage that it has done in terms of polarizing American politics on the issue of the Second Amendment remains as a legacy.
Yeah.
And so the fact that the NRA is not as powerful as it used to be actually isn't that relevant in a post-Trump era. In 2022, Biden was quoted as saying, "I support the Second Amendment, but the power of the Second Amendment is not absolute, and common sense gun control would not negatively affect it." I would try to find politicians who've called for the repeal of the Second Amendment. It basically doesn't exist.
No, I think it would be career suicide, wouldn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's crazy. It's such a knotty issue, and and you're like, it makes sense as to why this has been such a hot button topic in American politics for as long as it has, because it's all down to the interpretation of the law, right?
Yeah.
And that's always going to be up for grabs. Like, there's never going to be, we can never say definitively that is what something means, because everyone can interpret the Constitution and how many amendments are there?
Oh, put me on the spot.
Lots. But everyone can interpret those laws in whatever way they want, really.
There have been 27 amendments to the Constitution.
That doesn't feel like that many, considering how long ago it was written.
Yeah, I think basically for a certain period of time, the Constitution was seen as a living, breathing document that could be amended to do things like give women the right to vote and to see Black people as human beings. Things like this were not actually provided for in the original Constitution. And then it just kind of stopped. And now the Constitution is seen as this almost like nearly holy relic that can't be changed anymore. And it's like, well, you were making amendments up to a certain point. So why is that still not possible?
But that kind of protection feels very politically motivated, because it benefits certain people to change that perception. So it becomes like almost like this Bible-like quality. And I think that that's present in lots of different countries with the kind of like original constitutions, like how huge the campaign was for marriage equality in both the UK and in Ireland. And, the huge political motivation that had to be behind Repeal the Eighth in Ireland.
I was just about to say, I think a lot of people thought Repeal the Eighth could never happen. For listeners who are not familiar, Repeal the Eighth was a campaign to legalise abortion in Ireland. And a lot of people said it could never be done. And it was. And it was a huge, momentous occasion in Ireland. I went home to vote. It was all very emotional. Very proud day to be Irish. But yeah, I think it's important that we remember that laws can be changed and they should be changed.
It's going to be really interesting swinging this back to the West Wing. Is like, if we are kind of in tandem with the Clinton-Gore administration, and how that felt like. It feels like that administration is looked back on as like you said, like kind of the cool guys, like making waves. It'll be interesting to see how the fictionalized Bartlet administration goes toe to toe with that.
Yeah.
What an interesting study session, Leigh.
Yeah. I think the point about the racial history of the Second Amendment is especially important and something that we should really keep in mind. As citizens of the world.
yeah. And it's very prevalent in the UK as well, where like systemic racism within a country in the way that the laws have been written, or who's been writing those laws, can often get forgotten. And it's really important to give voice to the fact that the world is a different place, and equality is something that is a constant fight.
Yeah.
And we sometimes need to go back and rewrite things, because the people who wrote those and created those laws were not representative of the society that's living now, and that's okay.
Yeah. I think basically white men don't like the idea that their freedom is being curtailed in any way, shape or form But I do think it's important to remember that ultimately the Second Amendment was written in order to protect slave owners.
Yeah, no, I really, really enjoyed that session, Leigh, and I feel like I've come away almost with more questions than answers, but in a much more informed way.
I think it can be difficult as a British or Irish person where guns are just so not even a part of a conversation. And it's actually, the big topic is, especially living in London, is things like knife crime and trying to get knives away from vulnerable youth. It can be difficult to get your head around why this is even an issue. So I hope that discussion of the Second Amendment kind of gives some historical context for why this remains in any way a kind of still relevant debate.
Yeah, and it will come up as the presidential race really like gathers speed over the next few months. Like, I think it's such a cornerstone of a presidential race, isn't it, to discuss at points the Second Amendment. So I feel like now when Trump is sort of spouting some poison at some point, which no doubt he will, I'll have a kind of better grasp on almost like the political history regarding why those are such powerful things to be saying.
Yeah, absolutely. Just an interesting point to note before we go. I was looking at campus carry in terms of the states where you can have a gun on a university or college campus. And I was really shocked. I went to high school in Washington, and Washington is, I think, in the top 10 for gun restriction legislation, based off of charities that are trying to support gun control. But Washington is an institution by institution basis in that individual colleges and universities can decide whether firearms are allowed on campus. It's not banned in Washington state.
It's kind of wild, isn't it?
It's so crazy.
Subjects like the Second Amendment can feel like, because they are so much part of the zeitgeist of American politics, as a very reasonably uneducated on politics English person, I sometimes feel like I shouldn't have stupid questions regarding stuff like the Second Amendment because it's something everyone should know about. So I feel glad that we've started the conversation surrounding this because, like you're saying, it's so alien to us in the UK, but it's something that's really like woven into the fabric of American society.
Yeah, absolutely. And I would just like to say before we sign off on the Second Amendment as an issue, if you want to read more about this issue, Everytown for Gun Safety is a great organization, as is bradyunited.org, which is part of the campaign United Against Gun Violence. And Moms Demand Action is also an amazing grassroots movement.
Awesome.
If you want to read more about it.
I think I will, yeah. I also don't think it's the last that we see of it being discussed in the West Wing as well. So no doubt it will circle back to it.
Totally.
Well, thank you so much, Leigh. And excited to see what we might dig into next week. Remember, if you have any questions that you're like, I just can't get my head around this concept, please do get in touch with us, because likely it is that I've got it written down in my notebook and I'm just too scared to tell Leigh that I also think that.
Absolutely. Also, give us a follow at Queer Gals Watch the West Wing on Instagram. Chat to us.
Yeah, and you can drop us a message there. Just before we leave, Leigh, any last minute predictions for next week's episode?
I really want to finally meet Floaters. Where is Stockard?
Genuinely, like, it's mad that it's been 4 episodes and we have not seen even a photograph of her.
Yeah.
I would like more Charlie.
I need more Charlie in my life.
I need more of him just like wrangling the president.
I need CJ to stop worrying about her neck. I really hope that's not like a multi-episode arc. She also had a line where she was like, oh, can I try on the necklace you got for your wife, Leo? And Leo's like, no. And she's like, are you worried I'm going to stretch it out?
Yeah, I think my hope for subsequent episodes is that we never discuss women's necks again.
Excellent, yeah.
I think now we've got into like real political nitty gritty, like being votes down and stuff, I think my predictions are that we're going to have kind of like a little crisis like this every episode. And I'm really looking forward to that.
Amazing. Love you so much, Fifi. Chat soon.
Love you too. Let's meet up again in the late 90s in the White House, shall we?
Let me get my tan chinos.
And my pager and put it on my belt, so close to my pocket, yet not in my pocket. All right, see you next time.
Bye, Hans.
Bye.